Okay, so in this video, we're going to talk about the properties of quadrilaterals. And to do that, we're going to do a little family tree. And so then you can use these properties to solve problems like if they ask you to find the missing angles, missing sides, or um, or find the value of x. So the first thing is a quadrilateral. So we're going to do a quadrilateral family tree. Okay, so a quadrilateral. The main definition is it's a four-sided polygon. Okay, it's not a square, it's not a rectangle, it's just a quadrilateral. Any four-sided shape is known as a quadrilateral. For example, this one, we can just make that. Okay, so there's your quadrilateral. Now, quadrilateral, there are like three main categories. So the first one that we're going to talk about is trapezoids. Okay, so here we have a trapezoid, and this one looks more or less like this. Okay, now in this trapezoid you have one pair of opposite parallel sides. Okay, so if you want to mark them, so the parallel sides are this one, so also known as base 1 and base 2. From this trapezoid, we can get another one which is called the isosceles trapezoid. Okay, so this one looks more like an isosceles triangle being cut in half, I guess. So this one, we have that legs are congruent. Okay, so that's the first thing. That means this one is congruent to that one. Now we also know, since it's an isosceles trapezoid, oh sorry, you couldn't see that. So we also know that base angles are congruent. Okay, so this one here is congruent to that one, and also this one up here. Those two are also congruent. Okay, and then finally, we know that diagonals are congruent. So the diagonals are the lines that connect two vertices from side to side, and we know those two are congruent. Okay, so those are trapezoids. Then we also have from quadrilaterals, we have another subcategory, which is a kite. So a kite is pretty much on its own. Okay, so a kite looks like this. Okay, so in a kite, you know that those two are congruent. Okay, you also know that those two sides are congruent. Okay, and you also know that diagonals are perpendicular. Okay, so if you draw the diagonals here, they make a 90-degree angle. Okay, and so on. So now the main category is parallelograms. Okay, parallelograms. Okay, so parallelograms, they look like this. Okay, so in parallelograms, you have opposite sides are parallel and congruent. Okay, so that means this one is congruent to that one, but it's also parallel to that one. Now this one is congruent to that one, but these two are also parallel to each other. Okay, now you also know that opposite angles are congruent. Okay, now so that means if we have angle A here is congruent to angle B, because obviously they make sense, Opposite angles are congruent. They're both acute, so they're going to be congruent. They can also be obtuse, like this one. Okay. Now we also know that consecutive angles are supplementary. Okay, meaning they are to 180. So that means we have angle A and C. Angle A and C are consecutive, so that means they are going to add up to 180. Okay, and then another one is diagonals bisect each other. Okay, so that means each diagonal this diagonal is going to cut that diagonal in half, and this diagonal is going to cut that diagonal in half. Okay, now from the parallelograms we have two other shapes. One of them is the rectangle. Okay, and they look like this. Now rectangles have opposite sides that are congruent and they're parallel to each other, but if you notice that it's already up here. That's why everything that applies to parallelograms applies to rectangles. So I don't need to write that. I don't need to write all of this. So opposite angles are congruent. Yeah, that one's 90, that one's 90. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Yeah, this one and this one, they're both 90s, but they're up to 180, so they're consecutive. And yes, diagonals bisect each other. The only main thing is, the only difference, I guess, is that it has 4 right angles. It has 4 right angles. Okay, so that one, that one, that one, and that one. And also diagonals are congruent. Okay, so that means this one is congruent to that one. Okay, now we also have a rhombus. Okay, so a rhombus looks like this. Okay, so in a rhombus, the same thing applies. Opposite sides are parallel, yes. Opposite sides are parallel to each other. Opposite sides are congruent, yes. Consecutive angles are supplementary. Yeah, this one plus this one, they add up to 180. And then diagonals bisect each other. The new thing is that this one has 4 congruent sides. 4 congruent sides. Okay, this one, this one, this one, and that one. Okay, so all sides are congruent. And then diagonals are perpendicular. Diagonals are perpendicular, and then diagonals bisect opposite angles. Okay. All right, and the last quadrilateral that we're going to talk about comes from these two. So, and that is a square. Okay. And for a square, the main thing that you should know is all of the above. What do I mean by that? That everything that applies to parallelograms apply to squares. Everything that applies to a rectangle applies to squares. Everything that applies to a rhombus applies to square. Okay? So that's what you should know. However, you cannot apply the things from an isosceles trapezoid to a square because it's not kind of like in the same subcategory. Okay, these 4 are connected. They're both these 3. The rectangle, the rhombus, and the square. They're both parallelograms, and all parallelograms are quadrilateral. So that's the way you should think about it. All right. So now let's do some problems, and then you can just look at the book and then go from there. The homework. Okay, so let's look at this problem. So we're gonna find x and all angles. Okay, so let's say I have this shape, which is a parallelogram. So let's call this A, B, C, D. So A, B, C, D is a parallelogram. Okay, A, B, C, D is a parallelogram. So now, let's say angle A is 5x. Okay, and angle B is 10x plus 5. Okay, so well, since it's a parallelogram, I have to go back to my to my family tree and look at what do I know about angles. Well, these are opposite angles, so 5x, C is going to be 5x. Now, if B is 10x plus 5, then D is 10x plus 5. So, what do I know about angle A and B in this case? Well, they're consecutive, and based on this, consecutive angles are supplementary. So all I have to do is add these two angles, angle A and angle B, and set it equal to 180. Okay, so 5x plus 10x plus 5 equals 180. So combine like terms, we got 15x. Subtract 5, I got 175. So, yes, you can use calculator. So we have 175 divided by 15. You get a decimal. So x is equal to 11.67. Okay? Now, if you want to find the angle, so you have to do is plug it in. So we're going to say measure of angle A is equal to 5 times 11.67. So we do 5 times 11.67. We get 58.35. Okay, and then measure of angle B, we can either do, since we know these two are up to 180, all I have to do is 180 minus 58.35. And I get 121.65 degrees. Okay. Now, if this is 121.65, then angle D is 121.65, and so on. Okay. Now let's look at a different one. I guess this is example 2. Let's get let's use a rectangle. Okay. So to A, B, C, D is a rectangle. So the first thing that you need to do is always draw your picture. If they don't give you a picture, make sure you draw it. So we have A, B, C, and D. And then we have two diagonals. Okay? And then I know that, let's make that point P. I know that AP is equal to 4x plus 10. Okay? And I know that dP is equal to 3x plus 12. Okay? So I need to find x. And I also need to find diagonal AC. Okay, so how do I do that? Well, I know that diagonals in a rectangle are congruent, right? So diagonals are congruent. And I also know that since it's a parallelogram, diagonals bisect each other. So that means this one is congruent to that one. And that means this is also congruent to that one. So all those segments, BP is congruent to AP. PC is congruent to PD. AP is congruent to PD. So that means if I know AP and DP, all I have to do is set them equal to each other. 4x plus 10 is equal to 3x plus 12. Okay, so I'm going to subtract 3x and I get x plus 10 is equal to 12. I'm going to subtract 10 and I get x is equal to 2. So that's my x. Now I want to find AC. Well, in order to find AC, I need to find AP. So AP is going to be 4 times 2 plus 10. So that gives you 8 plus 10, that's going to be 18. Well, AP, it's only half of AC. That means that AC is equal to 36. Okay? And you are going to get a bunch of problems that look like this. All you have to do is just look at the properties and apply them all. And then just based on that, just solve the problems. All right, so let me give you what the homework is. In case you're not in class, you can get it done. So your homework or your assignment is on page 221. Page 221. You're going to do numbers 1, 2, 3, 5. Okay. What else? What else? You're also going to do 9, 10. That's it. Okay. All right. If you have questions, please come see me or send me an email.